Hi there. I'm just going to give you a quick refresher on the Next Step guided reading assessment. So here is our Westford definition of reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is the act of understanding what you are reading. It is intentional, active, and an interactive process. Readers use background knowledge, vocabulary, and text structures to determine the author's intent. Readers can remember and summarize what they have read to access the higher level processes such as analyzing, inferencing, and evaluating text. So this is our working definition so that we can develop a common language about discussing students' reading comprehension in the goal of not labeling them as a level. So instead of describing a student as like a level P or a level 38, we want to speak to students' strengths and areas of need in vocabulary, summary, evaluation and analysis, and background knowledge. So to overview the components of the 3 to 5 next step, the first one is the whole class comprehension piece. So you'll have 2 texts or passages for each time you give that. They take about 20 minutes each, and you give them 3 times a year. We would like to add in a summary for each one, so that adds on about 10 minutes, so you can plan for about 30 minutes per passage. And there's a literary passage and an informational passage for each time. And then there's the traditional guided reading assessment, which is the second piece, and that measures a student's instructional level, which is different than the DRA, which was independent level. And then there are some optional pieces in the kit as well. So this is what the whole class comprehension looks like. They'll do the reading and then answer the 8 questions. And then there's a little key for you at the bottom so you can keep track of what types of questions they're getting correct or incorrect. So again, when you give the whole class comprehension, it's 15 to 20 minutes per passage, 30 per passage with a summary. There are 2, a literary and an informational for beginning, middle, and end of the year. You do want to give both each time, but on separate days. And each passage is leveled appropriately for that point in the year. So students will read the passage silently and respond to the questions and then write their summary. The summary, you do not need to score or record anywhere. It's really just for your information, for your instruction. When you score the whole class comprehension piece, here's a close-up of the key so you can see what types of questions they are getting correct and incorrect. There'll also be a key in your manual just to remind you about what each letter combination stands for. It is one snapshot, though. There's just one type of each question, so we do want to keep that in mind. And then you just put the total amount correct right in that box there. There is a whole class comprehension profile. The paper copy is in your manual, and then there is a digital copy in our shared folder as well. So you write the student's name, the passage and date, and then you mark the ones they're getting correct and incorrect. So it's pretty easy to see whole class patterns. And here's just an example of another one filled out, and the total score goes in as well. So for the grades 3 to 6 kit, it covers levels K to Z. We do have some of the lower levels in the shared folder as well if you need them. The conference takes about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes per student. There isn't a summary, so you don't need to worry about that. And you want to assess any student that got fewer than 6 out of 8 questions correct on either passage. So to not have a reading assessment conference, they need a 6 out of 8 or better on both passages. And you can always assess more students if you want more information on them. So here's what it looks like. So students will read that to you, and you'll have a form to fill out. So you select the leveled passage. You can use your knowledge of the student and how they did on the whole class comprehension to determine the level. This is in your manual, so you can see which letter matches with which grade level equivalent. And then there's also some word list reading that I'll show you in a bit that you can use if you're kind of stumped and you really need more guidance on what level to start with. There is a literary and an informational passage for each level. You do not need to do both. You can consider a student's background knowledge, or you can just let the student choose which one they read. So on the form that you'll have, you read the text introduction that's right on the form, and then you take a modified reading record. In the manual, they give you this guide so you can see how to score errors. Substitutions every time are an error unless it's a proper noun, then it's only the first time. Insertions, omissions, told words, and misread contractions are all errors, and self-corrections and repetitions are not. So the student will read the first part of the text out loud, and then they can finish the rest silently while you analyze the running record, and you do not need to time them. There will be on the form, it will tell you where the student stops and can read silently, so that will be right on there for you. On the form as well, there's a section for analyzing errors through MSV. We're not going to do that part, so you can just cross that part right out. We are going to check off, though, any problem-solving strategies you thought you saw a student using while they were reading to you. And in the manual, there is a little bit more information on each of those strategies, so you can look at that if you're not quite sure. Then there's a fluency rubric, so you can rate the student whichever number you think is closest to how they read. You can just circle the number. When you flip the form over, there's a retell on the back, so you would tell the students, tell me what you read. You can prompt them without it impacting their score, so you can say, tell me more, or what else happened. There is a retelling rubric for the literary and the informational text, so you can use that. If you're trying to decide between a 4 or 5, if a student is definitely at a 4, you can prompt them, what do you think about that, to see if they can add in some personal thinking. And the student does not get to look back in the story for this part. So just keep in mind, our goals for retelling is that a student shows overall understanding, they can recall important information, they can sequence from beginning to end, and they can add personal thinking. If they can do those things, you can give them the score that matches. Then there are 5 comprehension questions that you ask. You remove the text if the student still has it. If they get the answer correct, you circle a 1, a 0 for incorrect, and a 0.5 for partial. After you ask all of the questions, you can repeat any questions that the student missed and give them the text back for them to look up. You would write LB for look back next to the question, and don't actually count those answers towards their comprehension score. So these 5 comprehension questions are coded similarly to the whole class comprehension, so you can look at which types of questions they need work on and which they can do really well independently with. And again, this is all oral. There's no writing component to this reading comprehension assessment. When you're finished and you're scoring, on the front page, you tallied the number of errors the student made during reading. You analyzed the student's errors and strategy use. You rated their fluency. And then on the back of the form, you rated the retelling. You scored the comprehension questions. And you come up with the comprehension score by adding the question score and the retelling score together. And that helps you to determine the instructional level of the student. So you find the number of errors on the chart on the back of the form. That gives you their accuracy. And then you match it up with the comprehension score, which again is the question score and the retelling rating together. So if the student falls into the white zone, that's independent, and you would reassess at a higher level. If they fall into the gray zone, that's instructional, and that's where we want to be. And if they fall into the black zone, that's frustration. So you would test again a level down. And again, this is what the chart looks like. So you would find the number of errors. So this particular student made 2 errors. That is 98% accurate. Their comprehension score was an 8, so it matched up here in the gray zone. So that is their instructional level. And then there are some spots to rate down accuracy, comprehension score, and fluency rating right here. And the last piece is the reflection portion on the form. You just ask yourself, what do I know about this student that I didn't know before this assessment conference? How will I use that knowledge to guide my instructional next steps? And then you can use this book to help you. There's also a notes sheet that you can use during your guided reading groups as well, if it's helpful to you. And then this is just the optional pieces I was mentioning. These word lists are in a spiral-bound little book in your kit. If you need some help deciding what level to start a reading assessment conference for a student on, you can use these word lists. So if it's third grade, you can use word list 3, fourth grade is 4, fifth grade is 5. And the student just reads down each column. You check for the words read correctly, circle and write what the student said for words that were read incorrectly, and a minus or a dash for any skipped words, and an SO for sounded out. And then you can match it up over on the scoring chart. Again, the number of words read correctly, and it will tell you either to try another word chart or a level to start on. So you can use that if it's helpful. You don't have to. And there is a reading interest survey that you can use. You can give it to your whole class. There's a beginning and mid-year survey for grades 3, 4, and for 5, 6. And then there's also a developmental word knowledge inventory. It's similar to Words Their Way, so you don't have to use it, but if you would like to, it is there for you. And that's it for our quick refresher. I also just wanted to remind you that we do have this FAQ. So if there are some questions that you're not sure about, you can refer to this FAQ for next step. If you have a question and the answer is not on here, let me know and I can add it. So some important things on the FAQ is a link to the shared folder with all of the materials digital. That's also in our shared drive. Some questions about the whole class comprehension piece. And then there's also some on the reading assessment conference, what to put into IPASS. So compare from spring to fall, that will change a bit. So stay tuned for updates on that. Thank you for listening and let me know if you have any more questions.